Meze Audio's new Lirics versus Dan Clark Audio's new E3s, and which is the better headphone for $2,000? Well, there's not quite a clear-cut answer, but so let's get into it. Meze, as you probably have already seen, just released their new version of their Lirics at $2,000, and also we had just before that, Dan Clark Audio came out with the E3s, or at least some months before, and both of these have portable pretensions. Both are closed-back portable headphones, and both are $2,000, but they are considerably different, and they do have some advantages and disadvantages versus each other, and some very kind of interesting stylistic cues, starting with, well, let's start with the E3s. Now, if you've seen my E3 video, you probably know all the details, so I'll just go over them briefly. We have the Gorilla Glass back, which was a daring move by Dan Clark to make them look, well, open, and they have a very open sound as well. Of course, they have Dan Clark Audio's very neat folding system, which if I hit it straight, makes them very compact and means they fit in a very small case, even though they consider them high-end headphones. They also have an instant fit system, actually much like a lot of other Meze headphones rather than these, where you can just put them on and they fit straight away. And they're extremely comfortable, and they also use AMTS technology, which we've seen, which improves the sound quality from the mids and upper mids and treble by damping vibrations by using a honeycomb-like panel full of Helmholtz resonators, which also allows them to tune the sound of the headphones. Along with a nitinol wire headband, which makes them extremely robust, and this really neat overall organic design, they're extremely comfortable, extremely resolving, and actually were quite a stunning entry at $2,000, as they're almost as good as the $4,000 flagships, which I have floating around behind me, the Expanse and the Stealth. And they also come with a high quality cable, although it doesn't look quite as fancy, it's still kind of handmade, with these medical grade Hitosec connectors that can be connected and disconnected a million times. I don't know what the number is, it's a huge number of times without degradation. That leads us into the Lirics, and the Lirics have a design which I find very nice. From the outside, they're quite subdued, although maybe slightly less so with this actual ebony wood there, but they have, for someone looking at you wearing them, you just look like you're wearing a normal pair of black headphones, unless of course you have the fancy aftermarket copper cable or silver cable on there. But if you look at the hinge inside, you can see some very sophisticated design there. And so when you put them on, you feel like, I'm putting on a really high quality pair of headphones, and they are like the E3s, very comfortable, although they have smaller overall cups. So maybe the odd person with very large ears may find them not a good fit. And they adjust via these sliders, which are fairly stiff but sufficient to keep the position of the headphone well, while allowing you to adjust them with some firm pressure. And overall, the design works quite well. The main disadvantage being versus the E3 is that they don't fold, which means, and like I said in my Lyric 2 video, case in point. So that's one against the new Lyric. The Lirics come with a new sound signature courtesy of this patch that they've added to the magnets of the driver to damp frequencies around 7 kilohertz, although the overall sound signature darkens the original Lirics, which means I'm going to actually agree with the sound signature that Meze present, which is balanced. Now, Meze's sound signature, if you follow all this discussion about the Harman target curve, and I don't want to go too deep into it, the Harman target curve, which is the E3 probably follows closest, is a kind of average of what an average person might hear or might prefer when listening to high-end speakers in a fairly well-damped room, but in a pair of headphones. So you could call it a neutral target rather than maybe flat, something which has some bass but maybe not too much. And they found in the research the amount of bass people prefer is very variable. Some people like a lot more, some people like a lot less. And along with some differences in how people hear the treble, that means people's impressions of headphones can vary considerably, although the Harman target curve kind of gets about 80% of people, somewhere around that mark. and a kind of average. Now, some people will find the E3s, which follow that, to be, well, pretty good sounding, maybe, and want a little bit more bass. Some people will find that the bass is sufficient, and maybe some people might find it a little bit too much. But considering that, the lyrics, on the other hand, while they have a similar-ish sound signature, are a little bit more pulled back, I'm guessing, and this is without seeing any measurement graphs from the Lyric 2s because I'm shooting this before the reveal, that they are, like typical Meze headphones, slightly pulled back at the 2 kilohertz mark. Now, what's to the 2 kilohertz mark? Well, that's where you have a lot of instruments and vocals come through, and so that means vocals and instruments sound a touch warmer than I think than they do with the DCA E3s. Now, which is better or worse? Well, technically, you might say the E3s are better, but some people actually don't like that particular sound signature and might prefer the slightly more mid-range pullback signature of the Lyric. I'd probably say overall that the Lyrics are darker, they have more punchy bass, although some of that has to do with the fact that the cups are smaller, and being smaller, the sound is a little bit more, I don't want to say closed in, because they do sound very open with music that does sound very open. Probably it sounds a little bit more busy, and the mid-bass may be a little bit more crowded is probably the best way to put it, which can work very, very well with a lot of music where you do want that kind of punchy sound, say more modern music, like I listen to Thievery Corporation from time to time, or Dead Can Dance. That can work very well. However, what happens if you start plugging them into gear? That's where the differences become very apparent. Like I talked about in my original Lyric video, the Lyrics are very sensitive headphones, which means that they don't require much power to get up to a very reasonable listening volume, although like any headphones, the amount of power that you require becomes exponentially greater as you turn up the volume control. So for example, the Lyrics are very good with dongle DACs, like this Cayenne RU6, which I've reviewed, Luxury and Precision's W4, which is excellent if you want a more cleaner, kind of clearer, more pure sound signature. And this Woo Audio Tube Mini, which is actually a tube-based dongle DAC, which uses these old-fashioned kind of hearing aid tubes. This was a really nice match. And that's an area where I find the Lyrics, even though they may be a slight touch on the warm side overall in tuning, do work really well with gear that has a slight warmth to them as well. So I really like them, for example, out of the Tube Mini. And I probably prefer them more out of the Cayenne than I would the W4, although both were excellent with them. And I remember turning up the W4 to about 86 on the volume, and I still had some to go before they became really loud. However, the E3, on the other hand, I can easily max some volume on all these devices, and that's when, with maximum volume on, say, the Tube Mini, is that where it starts to get a little bit kind of shouty and a little bit strained, especially given the lower sensitivity and lower impedance of these headphones mean they require more current to get going. So that meant, for example, I have behind me a Shit Audio mini stack with a Magni Piety. The Magni Piety was a really nice match with the Meze headphones because they are very sensitive. You can turn it up, somewhere to the middle, even on high gain, and the sound, especially with, say, Thievery Corporation or Dead Can Dance or something that's modern, which has a lot of bass, that's very punchy and entertaining. However, if I try that with the E3s on the mini stack, then it sounds kind of constrained, and yeah, it's not so fun. And that's a problem where that's when I need to get the E3s into one of the better amps I have here. I have an S17 in for a review. I have a lot of other gear, the good old GSX Mini. I have the new Shit Audio Mjolnir, which is my own personal amp, and I have my personal Studio 6 as well. That's where the E3 really shines, is when you get into those. Now, another area, once you start plugging both these headphones into the high-end gear, then of course that more more congested sound of the Lyrics becomes apparent versus the more open sound of the E3s. Although some of that may be slightly towards the tuning, I do feel like the E3s sound more like an open back headphone. So if I get into some classical music and I want to have more of that space, more where I want to hear the individual instruments more clearly, that's where the E3s shine on the high-end gear, and that's where they beat the Lyrics. So for higher end listening with better gear, I think the E3s do a better job. However, the Lyrics where you have lesser gear, again, the good old dongle DACs with like this Tube Mini and the like, are where the Lyrics shine because they don't require so much to get going. You can still get a good punchy bass out of them, out of even lesser gear, as simple as a dongle DAC or even the output of something like a MacBook Pro, although you're going to be very volume limited there and you can easily hit maximum volume even with these, and very especially with kind of typical high dynamic range classical music that has a lot of quiet passages. Now, one of the things that the E3 has the advantage of is it responds very well to EQ. Now, sometimes I'm listening and Dead Can Dance is probably my favorite example, and I just want to kind of have some real slam going on there. But of course, the E3s are more of a fairly neutrally tuned headphone. So I've got a Lockyear in here from Shit Audio, and I will just jack up both left-hand dials, which is the low bass, which you don't hear so much of, and the mid bass, which is what most bass that you hear. And then the E3s really do slam, and I'll talk more about that in the Lockyear review. And that can make a lot of music really fun. Also, if you have some music which is kind of really bright, maybe a little bit harsh, you can also turn that down as necessary. Although with the AMTS system in the E3, that knocks out a lot of the resonances that make the higher frequencies and the mid-range sound a little bit harsh. So you can make these slam, you can have a lot of fun with these as a pair of high-end headphones. However, this is one negative of the Lirics is, I don't know if it's because of the smaller driver or the fact that it is a smaller driver in a more enclosed space, is that when you turn up the mid-bass on the Lockyear with the new Lirics, is that you don't get slam. You feel like the driver just is in this space where it just cannot move. And I don't know how to describe the sound. It wasn't boomy because it wasn't a loose bass. It was like overdamped. It just couldn't slam. And that was one of the disadvantages of these. When you do get really punchy notes like drum hits and the like, it does come through very, very well with the Lirics. But it's when you want a lot of bass, and that's where that restriction comes through, and that's where they don't work so well. So overall, we have two very different headphones. I'd say with low-powered gear or simpler gear, I think the Lyric does better. With higher-end gear, I think the E3 does better, and also it's more portable. This is the kind of headphone I take with a more powerful DAP or some kind of seriously powerful portable amp, such as the Enlium HPA23. That would work very, very well with something like these. Whereas if I wanted to throw something in a large suitcase with just a dongle DAC, then I'd probably take the Lyrics, or something that I want to plug into the computer. And the original Lyrics is what I used to use with just a dongle DAC and plug into my computer when I wanted to watch YouTube videos, as it does a very good job in that. So I hope that gives you a good overview of both headphones. If you do have auditioned or used both of these headphones, actually you can help out everyone who's watching these videos by posting your impressions down in the comments. These videos, as always, are designed to be useful for people who are looking to buy a pair of headphones or other gear that I review, and any other additional information will be helpful for them. Likewise, if you'd like my buying advice, a lot of people do ask me for help, do consider buying me a coffee. If you join as a member, then you can join my Discord and ask me questions directly, and higher end members can even call me. As always, thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you online.